Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland. My name is Susan Hammer and I'm president of the City Club. I'm really excited about today's program and delighted to see so many members and guests here today. I want to remind you, as we always do, to turn off your cell phones and other things that sing and beep and break into song. Our next week's Friday Forum will be a debate on the subject that we just discussed, the form of government, Portland's form of government. Robert Ball and Chris Smith will be here. Our moderator will be Nick Fish. I hope you'll all be able to come. To continue the celebration of Earth Day, which we're starting today, we are going to be having some tours in the months of May and June. City Club is going to sponsor 4 tours of green buildings in Portland. To explore sustainable design and practice. They will be on May 10th, May 24th, June 14th, June 28th. The details are all in your bulletin and on the website. We'll be touring in the Pearl District, on the South Waterfront and OHSU, at PSU Engineering Building and Living and Learning Center, and on North Mississippi. So the tours will start at 6 in the evening. They'll be over by 7:30 or 8 o'clock. There will be a limited number of places available, so if you're interested, please sign up with Kim McCool. Next Tuesday at City Club Commons at 5:30 in the evening, author Matt Leininger, who wrote the book called The Next Form of Democracy, How Expert Rule is Giving Way to Shared Governance and Why Politics Will Never Be the Same. Leininger will be interviewed by City Club Board of Governors member and the Dean of the College of Urban and Public Affairs at PSU, Larry Wallach. This ought to be very interesting. Please RSVP if you intend to come. And finally, next Friday, we have our Friday final, beginning at 4:30, going to 6 at City Club Commons. This is a time to meet other City Club members and their guests. We will have members of our form of government and our PDC committees there to discuss their reports with you. Please come for refreshments and conversations. We have one new member today who I'd like to introduce. Her name is, please stand when I mention your name, and then let's all welcome her. Her name is Pam Sporberg. She is a graduate student in public administration and sustainable development at Portland State University. Pam, could you stand? She's right back there. And for those of you who are here today who are guests but not members, we have a special deal going between now and the end of May. Those of you that join will get a free lunch, and those of you who are members that are credited for the guest joining will also get a free lunch. Compliments of our member and friend Al Jubitz. So hope you'll consider that. We would love to have everyone here be members. We are so fortunate in the city of Portland to have great corporate citizens that help make our programs possible. Our sponsors this quarter are Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, and KeyBank. Please join me in thanking them. And now for our program. A revolution is happening here in Portland and spreading around the world. It's a revolution in how we live on the land. We're transforming our buildings, our roads, and our utilities from things that are harmful to the environment to things that restore and nurture the earth. Portland is becoming a green hub, producing innovative designers, builders, and manufacturers. Today, in celebration of Earth Day, our program will be Building a Green Future. Our speakers are Jason McClennan and Dennis Wilde. Jason McClennan is an architect by training, and he's a former principal in an architectural firm in the Midwest. He's author of 3 books on green design. He's nationally recognized as a leader in sustainable building, and he is CEO of the Cascadia chapter of the Canadian and the U.S. Green Building Council. Dennis Wilde is a principal in Gerding Edlen Development Company. He has a background in architectural engineering and urban planning. He's been active in construction and development since 1967. Dennis is passionate in his commitment to sustainable building and design. Please join me in welcoming Jason McClennan and Dennis Wilde.
Thank you, Susan. It's a real honor to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's a great honor to be speaking before Dennis, who I've come to greatly admire since I've moved back to the West Coast recently. And this subject that I'm going to be talking about is one that's quite dear to my heart. And for a long time, the issues that we're going to talk about today were considered fringe issues by many in our society. But there is a shift occurring that Susan alluded to. And when, about 3 weeks ago, I was in an airport in Atlanta, and I saw the cover of Sports Illustrated, and it had global warming on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And there was a picture of a baseball player up to his waist in water. Did anyone see that? And I knew suddenly that the shift had really started to happen when Sports Illustrated covered it. And it was interesting that inside the magazine, what they pointed out was the number of baseball stadiums that will be underwater in the coming years. And I thought that's pretty interesting, but I have a feeling that the residents of Florida are going to be more concerned about other things than if they can see a live baseball game if it's flooded, if that happens to South Florida. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about one sector, if you will, of this issue related to the environment, and the sector is green building and sustainable design, and I'm going to be reading a couple quick excerpts from my book, The Philosophy of Sustainable Design. Now, when you look at green building, and I like to look at it as a movement, if you will, it's a movement that is sweeping the country, in fact, beyond these borders to countries all over the world, and it's quickly becoming the fastest growing and most important trend in the building industry today. In fact, I would put forth the idea that the changes brought on by this movement, the green building movement, are the most important changes in the design and construction field that this country has seen, possibly including the rise of health and safety codes at the beginning of the last century. So that's not a small statement, right? When you consider the potential challenges we face from global warming, pollution, and climate change, among other problems that we're seeing, the disappearing honeybees, as my son showed me on his school report the other day. Now, having said this, I want to back up and define what we mean by green design and sustainable design, as I prefer to call it. And there's a definition that I like to use that I think has 3 important points to make about this movement. So when we say sustainable design, what do we mean? And for me, it means a design philosophy where we seek to maximize the quality of the built environment while minimizing or eliminating negative impact to the natural environment. So I'll read that one more time. Sustainable design is a design philosophy that seeks to maximize the quality of the built environment while minimizing or eliminating negative impact to the natural environment. And this definition is useful because it highlights 3 key points. First and foremost, it states that this is a philosophy or an approach to design. It's not a style, it's not a certain building type, it isn't how your building is necessarily going to look. It's an approach to how we design something so that we minimize or eliminate negative environmental impact and create better places for people. And that's very important because for many years people had in their mind when they thought of a green building a certain look that they thought perhaps was unattractive or maybe they liked it. And that's not the case. In fact, this approach allows us to design anything in a way that is better for the environment, whether it is a building, but also the chair that you're sitting on, the table that you're sitting at, could take the same philosophy and same approach so that the impact, again, to the environment is diminished and the benefit to all of us is increased. Now, the next part of the definition is about quality, as I was saying. And by quality, we mean creating better places for people, better products for our use, and better places to inhabit. Now, early on, as I mentioned, some people were concerned that the rise of green building in our industry was going to mean that design quality was going to be hurt. Here was another set of issues that we had to consider. So not only did we have to consider the cost of a building, its functionality, its durability, and how it looked, but geez, now we had to consider all these other issues and how it was made, what it was made of, and how it was going to be used. But in fact, what we're learning is that it's actually adding greater meaning and richness to our design, and the opposite is true. That if we're going to create places, we're going to create architecture, and we want it to be sustainable, then these buildings, these constructs, even furniture, things in our houses, need to be beautiful, just like any other architecture does, just like any other design does. And it needs to inspire us to want to take care of the building and the thing that we create. Otherwise, why make them? Why make buildings for people if they aren't going to inspire us and motivate us? And the last part of the definition is the obvious one, is that we're trying to reduce and actually eliminate negative impact on the environment. And as we grow from 6 to 7 billion people and beyond, this is going to be an incredibly necessary step in our evolution as an industry. Now, as Sim van der Rijn, who was one of the pioneers of the green building movement, said in his important book, Ecological Design, in many ways, the environmental crisis is a design crisis. It is a consequence of how things are made, buildings are constructed, and landscapes are used. And sustainable design is an approach that looks to the design process to heal. It implies responsibility from all of us, and it implies a far-reaching respect for natural systems and resources, respect for people, and respect for the cycle of life. In many ways, I like to think of green design, the kind of work that the Dennis's group does and many other leaders in this city in particular, is what they are doing is expanding the definition of what you should consider to be a good design. If you have a beautiful building that wins a lot of design awards but makes people sick by being in it because it has sick building syndrome, it is not a good design. And if you have a building that is highly functional and was delivered on budget and on time, but it has a huge environmental footprint, then it is not yet a good design. Now, the average green building, so now moving towards our topic more directly, as defined by the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED rating system that many of you have probably heard of, uses 30% less energy, 30 to 50% less water, and between 50 and 90% less construction waste is generated with little or no cost premium. And the best green buildings today exceed those numbers by quite a bit. We're seeing 60 to 70% reductions in energy use among the leading green buildings around the country with very short payback times. So this movement is really picking up steam because of these numbers. And as a movement, every great movement goes through various stages in its development. It tends to go through 3 stages. And the first stage is usually ridicule, right? When new ideas are brought forth, the first thing that happens is people ridicule them, and that happened to the green building movement. And then it goes through discussion when people begin to talk about these ideas, and it happens more. And then you finally have adoption of the new ideas. And I think we're in a very exciting transition phase. It just happened in the last year where we've begun to move from discussion into adoption, and the rate of adoption is increasing. And as I mentioned just a few years ago, many of these issues were actually ridiculed depending on which market you're in. And I know that when I practiced in the Midwest and did work around the country, in many markets, if I brought up green design, people kind of snickered in the back of the audience, and they thought I was just a tree hugger and that this wasn't practical, serious stuff. They've changed their minds. Now, consider these facts. The value of green construction in the United States has grown from $800 million in 2000 to over $12 billion in 2007, representing more than 800 million square feet of building space. And these are just LEED buildings. There are now more than 30,000 LEED accredited professionals in the United States, consisting of architects, engineers, and other building professionals that have taken and passed a core competency exam, the LEED accreditation exam. And that's up from just a couple thousand just a few years ago. So now there's this huge army of individuals making change. And Oregon and Portland is not left out of this movement. In fact, the opposite is true, that this place is leading the charge across the country. And people look to this city for leadership and ideas. So consider these facts for a moment, that the state of Oregon, this state, comprises only 1.2% of the U.S. population, And this city is about the 30th largest city, right? And yet, only 3 other states in the US have more LEED buildings than Oregon, and only 1 city has more LEED buildings than this city. Not too bad. And it's very impressive that all city-owned buildings in Portland have to be a minimum of a LEED Gold standard, which is the second highest level in the LEED rating system. And we have 2 platinum buildings in this city, the Armory Building and the OHSU Center for Health and Healing, right? And for those that don't know, platinum is the highest level awarded by the U.S. Green Building Council. And each year, we're seeing more and more energy and resource-efficient technologies and materials being created, and it's becoming easier to reach these higher levels. And the last thing that I want to talk about before I hand it off to Dennis is, where is this all headed? Where are we going in the future with our buildings? So every year they're getting more efficient, and they're becoming less impactful on the environment in terms of what's possible. And the answer to that question, I think, is incredibly inspiring. And many times when people, in the past talked about the future of architecture, the image that they had was of the Jetsons or Blade Runner or Star Trek, and they had these ideas of places that were very much like machines and very clinical. And I think that this is wrong, that this isn't where we're headed in the future with our buildings. And I believe a new type of metaphor will describe the buildings of the future, not one that is cold and mechanical, but one that is warm and living. And where I believe architecture is going is to a world of living buildings, and buildings that are more aptly compared not to a machine, but to something that grows in your garden, a simple flower. And so I want you to, for just a moment, use your imagination and imagine what it would be like if our buildings were designed to operate like flowers. And if you think about a flower is like a building in that it's rooted to place. It can't get up and move around to get the resources it needs. But a flower, or the plant that the flower grows on, has to get all of its energy from the sun. It has to get all of its water from the rain that falls on the few square inches that it inhabits. It gets all of its nutrients from the soil. It's habitat for other organisms like our buildings are for us. It's comprised of integrated systems that respond to the cycles of the seasons. It opens and closes. It tracks the sun. It recedes into the earth when it's cold and rises forth in the spring again. And so too must our buildings operate like this. And I'd say the last connection is that we all think flowers are beautiful. And again, our buildings must be beautiful. And so I think buildings of the future are going to basically do just that. They're going to harvest all their own energy, their own water, and not create pollution for their immediate environment, just like our flowers. Now, the exciting thing is, now this sounds like a futuristic idea, is that this future is beginning to happen now. The Cascadia Region Green Building Council has launched a new program called the Living Building Challenge that carefully describes what a building needs to do in order to reach that level, not look like a flower, but operate with the same level of impact as a flower, at least strive to get there. And all around the country, there are now projects pursuing this level of certification. And I know of at least 2 in this city that are going to try to do it. So imagine cities filled with buildings that are truly healthy to be in, that cause no net negative impact to the environment, and inspire us all to be better stewards of the natural resources that sustain us. And with that, I want to leave you with a quote and hand it off to my good friend. And the quote is by Teilhard de Chardin: "The world belongs to those that give the next generation reason to hope." Thank you.
Well, Jason did a good job of painting the big picture, the national picture. What I want to do is describe to you a little more of a personal picture, and that is, the story of how our firm, Gerding Edlen Development, came to adopt the posture we have relative to the buildings that we build and the impact that we have on the planet. And what I think that portends for businesses all across the city, all across the state, and ultimately all across the nation. For those of you that don't know, we're a large regional real estate development company working up and down the West Coast. We have offices in Los Angeles and Seattle, and our headquarters are here in Portland. And so we're all about building buildings and building the city. And over the 11 years that we've been in existence, we have grown from roughly $35 million a year to now about $2.5 billion in terms of gross revenues. So pretty phenomenal growth in a short period of time. And while I can't draw a direct linkage between our phenomenal growth and our environmental ethic, I think certainly there is one. And I think it's a testimony to what's possible for businesses across the spectrum. We set out when we, and this isn't something that just came to us in a flash of light, handed down from above. This has been a long and painful process to get to where we are today. We started out doing suburban office buildings and projects much like any other developer, and then gradually began to migrate towards doing almost exclusively urban redevelopment in city projects, mixed use, often joint ventures with a governmental entity. That's done a number with the City of Portland, with the Portland Development Commission, as a matter of fact. And so we have a tendency to maybe have a predilection towards what I refer to as brain damage. We're not afraid to take on the crazy project. And so when we were doing the Wieden and Kennedy building, we were looking out across at the Bliss Weinhardt Brewery, and Bob Gerding and I were up on the what's now the deck of the Wieden and Kennedy, looking across, saying, that's an incredible opportunity. What could we do with that? And so we made an offer, and it was rejected. And then a year later, Stroh's, who happened to own them, decided they wanted to get out of the beer brewing business, and so we ultimately ended up acquiring the brewery blocks. Well, one of our first major decisions was to put all the parking underground. Now, why in hell would you do that? And now that's incredibly expensive. And you have to commit to all of this parking before you even know exactly what you're going to build above. So it's kind of a little bit wrong-headed. But we knew that if we didn't do that, it would be deadly. If we tried to silo all that parking in one of the towers on the block, or have the first 3 or 4 stories of every building being parking, that we'd create a deadly environment. And we knew that would be deadly for ourselves as a business enterprise. So we dug a very large hole, 2.5 blocks big, went down almost 4 levels, and there were a lot of snickering around town, thinking that, well, those fools are going to leave a large lake. But fortunately, we didn't, and it was successful. And in the process of doing the brewery blocks, we learned some really incredible lessons. Number one, when we started, we decided that we wanted all of these buildings to be as environmentally responsible as we possibly could. And so we adopted the LEED metrics as a measure for trying to figure out how we're doing. The second was, we knew that this had to be a mix of live, work, play. We had to create an active environment where there wasn't one. When we started, there were only 200 employees in those 5 city blocks, and they were all workers at Bliss Weinhardt Brewery, and very few people, other than the workers in the brewery, went down there. You could shoot a cannon down the streets, most times day or night, and not hit anything. And so we knew we had to create a different kind of environment. So it had to be a mix of residential, office, and retail to be successful. And in the process of doing that, we had a huge advantage. We had Powell's Bookstore, which is 6,000 to 8,000 people a day go through Powell's Bookstore. Do you know that? It's the largest bookstore in the United States. It's humongous. It's amazing. It's an icon. People come to Portland just to go to Powell's Bookstore. And then we had Whole Foods as a tenant, and so, we had some good fortune that fell our way. But what we realized in the process of going through that was that it's not about building individual buildings. It's about building great places for people to live and work and play. And so what are the components that make for great places? I mean, you can't just, you have to think about the software. It's not just about the buildings. You can build wonderful buildings, but as Jason said, if those buildings don't respect and respond to the needs of the people that are going to occupy them, what the hell good are they? You know, we enjoy this building because this is an incredible space. I mean, it's joyful to be here. Joy and delight are part of what makes urban environments, you know, fantastic places to be. And it's what makes Portland so unique, because there are lots of opportunities in Portland for joy and delight. And so you have to focus on the software, not just the hardware. You can't just be bricks and mortar. You got to be about how are people going to work and live with this place. And at the same time, you have to reduce the environmental footprint. And so those two, I think, are absolutely wedded. If you're doing a really responsible building, it has to perform remarkably well to the function it was intended to for the people that are going to occupy it. And then second, it has to occupy the absolutely smallest environmental footprint that it can. And so those are the challenges. And that's what's so dynamic about the time in which we live and are experiencing right now. I think we are truly at a crossroads in history. And you've all read the stories about global warming, and so I don't need to recite, you know, all of the horror stories. But there's one quote, I love this. William McDonough is a world-famous architect that's been one of the pioneers in the green movement, and he's a master speaker. But one of the things that he says in virtually every talk he gives, which I hold dear, is that each and every decision and action that we take must be considered in light of what is good for all the children of all the species for all time. And so if you take that to heart, then you have to pattern every decision you make relative to that metric. And so for us as a firm, we found the natural step. The natural step is a Swedish movement that came to the US in 1996, and ourselves, along with Nike and Collins Pine and a number of others have been active in the natural step. And so it provided a way in which we could measure our performance against some metrics, which included, by the way, you know, how does our consumption of resource and our impact on the environment, what is the effect of all that on the people that occupy the planet? Yeah, because I think people often are left out of the environmental equation, and they clearly are a critical component. So with that, let's talk about some of the things that we're doing. Jason mentioned that there's a number of LEED Platinum. There are 2 LEED Platinum buildings already certified in Portland. We were fortunate to be a part of both of those projects, the Gerding Theater, occupying the Armory, and the OHSU Center for Health and Healing, which is the largest, most complex building ever to receive that designation. There are only 30-some LEED Platinum buildings in the country, and OHSU is the largest, 400,000 square feet. The cost premium to get to LEED Platinum was about 1.5% to 2%, about $2 million. We will recover enough just in the energy savings alone to pay that off in less than 4 years. Less than 4 years. Then if you take the business energy tax credits from the state, which are almost $1 million, and some incentives we got from the Oregon Environmental Trust and some other things, it's actually, about 1.5 years. So pretty phenomenal payback. That building consumes 60% less energy than a conventional building and 56% less water. So I think we're demonstrating that significant change is possible. Now, where are we going as a company? We've stated publicly that within 5 years, we want to get to Jason's living building standard on every damn building we do. Every building. So what does that mean for, yeah, that's great, one company. I think it goes beyond just us. We couldn't do it if it wasn't for the resources and the capabilities that exist here in Portland. You know, we have the finest architects and engineers in the United States right here. You know, as a company, we're exporting them up and down the West Coast. You know, we've got firms here that are doing work all over the world. So we've got this enormous resource base here. We've got a talent pool here. And I think oftentimes Oregonians are incredibly apologetic about, well, we're just little old Oregon. Well, you know, we're the center of the universe in terms of, seriously, we're the center of the universe in terms of moving towards a more responsible approach to how we deal with the environment, right here. And I think the economic future of the state of Oregon and of the Northwest ought to be grounded in those principles. Alan Alley, who's Governor Kulongoski's deputy, Deputy Chief of Staff. Thank you. Deputy Chief of Staff has said in many talks I've heard him give recently that this transformation that we're caught really still in the beginning part of. You know, you go anywhere else in the country, you probably couldn't draw, what, 500 people that are here today? Close to it? You couldn't draw 500 people to listen to a talk on sustainable buildings, for heaven's sakes. But here you can. So, you know, what's happening in Portland and in Seattle and in Vancouver, British Columbia, this is the prow of, this is the prow of the ship cutting through the water. You know, change is happening faster here than elsewhere. And so I think we need to take advantage of that and really build the economy of this state on these capabilities and these opportunities. Alan Alley, as I mentioned, said in his talks, this is the equivalent in terms of the economic impact. This is the equivalent of man dragging fire into the cave. This is the biggest economic transformation. Seriously, I believe him. Trust me, I believe him. So I think this is the biggest economic transformation that we will experience in our lifetimes, and it's here, it's beginning now, and we ought to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Time for questions and answers, and I'd like to encourage those of you who are shy about getting to the microphone very often to get up there and let us hear from you. Our first question will be asked by board host Ron Paul. Ron is on the City Club Board of Governors, and he is chair of the Agra Committee. He's a consultant for business, government, and nonprofits as a civic entrepreneur. Ron.
Thomas Friedman in Sunday's New York Times Magazine referred to green as being the new red, white, and blue. If we were sitting in the Midwest instead of at the prow of the ship in Portland, Oregon, how would you address the patriotic strings of our heartland with the notion of what William McDonough calls sustaining, not sustainable?
Yeah, I just came from Kansas City. And I think that's an excellent question. And the truth is that I would have answered that question very differently 2 years ago. So I think now, anywhere you go, whether it's Kansas City or Alabama or places that maybe are not on the prow of the ship, I think people are beginning to realize that these issues are not partisan and that they are issues that are affecting so many of us. And when you look at what happened with Katrina in the Gulf Coast, I think it opened people's eyes to the fact that huge social disruptions are possible as a result of the changes that are coming ahead. And those issues then need to cut across any kind of divisions between red states and blue states, between religions, between political backgrounds. And so the change is happening, and I'm seeing it everywhere. 2 years ago, it would have been very different.
Bob Wise, City Club member. Jason and Dennis, thank you so much for your leadership, so significant to the Northwest. I wanted to ask you both to comment on what you think the city, the metropolitan region, and the state of Oregon can do to expand its leadership, not just maintain it, in the green economy of the future.
Well, I think we need to look at ways to streamline permitting processes. Ron, when he was speaking, mentioned that, I think you're the one that mentioned that Portland now, or Jason mentioned that Portland now requires a LEED Gold or equivalent for all new city buildings. Well, why is it just public buildings? Why not have that as a standard for all buildings? Yesterday, there was the Best Awards in Portland. The best stands, I think it's the Office of Sustainable Development does this as an award every year for recognizing environmentally responsible business activities and practices. And it used to be just the city of Portland, now it's statewide. There were 500 people there yesterday morning too for that breakfast. And one of the things that I somewhat maybe foolishly suggested was that BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association, ought to reserve the designation of a Class A office building for only those new office buildings that need a minimum of a LEED Gold or better. We had to start that program here in Portland and then roll it out nationwide. That'd be one idea.
Chris Smith, City Club member. This question is specifically directed to Dennis, but I'd be interested in Jason's thoughts as well. Very heartened by the economic payback that you describe on the OHSU Center, and the ability to make sustainability pencil out. Heard a little bit different perspective yesterday. I was at the Coalition for Livable Future Summit, and one of your principals, Mark Edlen, was on a panel there, and he said that the sustainability premium on a high-end condo is about $20,000 on a $500,000 condo, and that you were having trouble getting people to pay that premium in the market. Can you reconcile the commercial and the residential and how that fits together?
Well, I think, I shouldn't yell into this thing, should I? Mark was absolutely right. So far, while the public, will say, yeah, we really like the idea of better indoor air quality and reduced utility bills, they aren't willing to pay for it. So we can't garner any more of a price premium for our condos than the project down the street that is not engaged in any of the activities that we are. So I think he was probably talking about the Casey, and we're spending about $1.5 million premium there on features to make that building more energy efficient. It's going to be about 50% more efficient than current code. And more conserve a lot of water, and also we're adding a lot of art to it. That's going to be incorporated into the architecture of the building because of that whole issue of joy and delight. But we can't get a penny more per square foot than a project down the street that's currently for sale. So I think that's just the facts in the marketplace, and that's why when we take and are talking to a prospective build-to-suit client, for instance, we cannot typically get them to spend more, for that building. So we have to figure out ways to achieve the energy savings, achieve the water conservation without spending a premium, or be able to show them a 3-4 year return on investment.
And let me just add one more thing. I completely agree with Dennis. I think that the whole idea of the green cost premium depends on the project. It's always a case-by-case thing. And so on some projects we've seen at LEED Platinum level there's no premium. In many others that there is a premium, and they're at varying lengths of time. Some are very short and some are longer. But it's usually because of a whole host of factors that are there, whether the building is green or not, in terms of the construction market, the complexity of the project, the site, who the design team is, and other things in the design that can bring the cost up or down. And so really it's something that needs to be looked at on a project-by-project basis.
Hi, my name is Kristen Chambers, and I own a company called Green World Now, and our mission is to take eco-friendly and green products to the mainstream retailers. So my question is relatively pursuant to the question that you just had. Dennis, you mentioned a tax credit that you'll be receiving, or the OHSU building will be receiving from the state. And I'm just interested to know how I can find out about that type of tax credit for the consumers when the lead pilot for residential homes comes out this summer. As, believe it or not, the mainstream retailers are asking about it and are interested in it as a way to entice their customers to buy green, eco-friendly products.
Okay. The program that I was mentioning is through the Oregon Department of Energy. It's called the Business Energy Tax Credit Program. So it's available to businesses that are pursuing energy conservation measures. And frankly, the Oregon model is, I think, and a lot of people agree, the best of its type in the nation. It's a 35% investment tax credit. They've expanded it about 4 years ago to include LEED certified buildings, so you don't have to qualify each energy efficiency measure. Now, if you're meeting LEED, silver, gold, or platinum, you get an incrementally higher amount of a tax credit with each designation. There are similar programs on the residential side. It's not the Betsy, but they do have a residential program as well. So simply contact the Oregon Department of Energy and they can make you aware of those programs.
Jeannie Burt, City Club member. I hope I'm going to quote Dennis. I wrote down some quotes, but I think you said people left out of the environment. People are left out of the environmental picture, and they're clearly a component in it. And I hope I don't feel like to sound like a wet blanket, but I have a question. How do you and Jason both address population control as part of this statement? And how does, if you do deal with it, how does that affect your business model and your future plans? Sorry.
Oh, that's a bomb.
Remember, I'm a real estate developer.
I just had a baby a year ago, so I can't even.
Obviously, population growth and expansion is one of the critical issues facing us worldwide. It's not so much of a problem in the developed regions of the world, obviously. I mean, the population is pretty well stabilized in the United States and most of Europe and most developed countries. The problems are in the undeveloped countries where, families typically have multiple children because they want at least enough of them to live to ensure that they're going to be able to survive as they move into their elder years. And so there are, these are global dynamics that we're dealing with, and I don't have instant answers for them. I think there are some great programs that are out there and that many of us support through Mercy Corps and others, but, I don't have a better answer for you.
So now they're turning to me. I wish I had a better answer as well, but I actually appreciate the question, and I think what's important for us is to keep asking the question, and keep asking the question in the work that all of us are doing in the green building industry and otherwise. What are the impacts, not only on issues like that, but any social justice issues that are out there? The materials that we use in our buildings often come from places and put people in situations in other countries that we wouldn't wish upon our own children, and we need to ask those kinds of questions. And so this touches on a whole range of issues that for the most part the green building movement has been fairly silent on, and we need to stop being silent about them. And it's the issue of what effect does it have to other people that we don't see on our streets, and there is a big effect. And our pollution, our waste, the externalized impacts of much of our production is borne by others that aren't benefiting from the services that we are. And there is an injustice there. And so I welcome the question. I just wish I was smart enough to have a good answer. So.
My name's Trip Royce. I'm a City Club member. You guys, and I'm hearing it all over the place, that this whole business, there's an opportunity for this to become a really strong economic engine for the state going into the future. When you close your eyes and look 10 years into the future, what is it that we're exporting?
Well, certainly I think we're exporting intellectual capital. I think that's probably, frankly, we're a small, lightly populated state. That's probably our biggest export opportunity. But there are others. There's a great example. I love to tell this story. There was a researcher at OSU that developed a new adhesive for the wood industry, the wood products industry, by watching how mollusks attach to rocks underwater. It happens at room, or actually below room temperature. The bottom of it, can happen at ambient earth temperatures. It uses benign chemicals, primarily proteins and a couple of enzymes. You can make it in your bathtub, and it's going to transform the wood products industry. Now, Columbia Forest Products has now converted their entire product line to this particular adhesive. They funded the research, and now they're going to start licensing that to to other manufacturers of wood products. California has recently declared they aren't going to allow wood products with additional urea formaldehyde in them, into the state. So where are people going to be looking for the answer? They're going to be looking to Oregon. We need to find other opportunities like that and create other product lines, where we can take the intellectual capital of developing those here and then export that.
And I'll add that, on the topic of exporting, we have a society that has believed that it's okay to export anything, anywhere on this planet. And inherent in that assumption is a huge problem in terms of the burden placed on the environment when we ship things all over the world. It's only our ideas, our intellectual capital, that we should be shipping. We want the best ideas from anywhere on the planet, right? But things that are heavy, things that we make, shouldn't be actually exported very far, and there should actually be more of a burgeoning local economy and a regional economy and a strengthening there. And Oregon can play a big role as a big player in a regional economy rather than a small player in a global economy that is not sustainable. And I think that there's some magic when you turn the idea of exporting on its head and just say what we really need is, as Dennis is saying, is to export the brilliance of this population, and it is brilliant, and that's magic.
I'm Brian Campbell, City Club member. One of you mentioned the idea that making places is actually what this is really all about, places for people. Translating that to the community level, I know that LEED is about to unveil a new certification program for neighborhood design, the LEED ND, and I was wondering if you could give us a little perspective, your perspectives on that program and on the whole issue of making places in the sense of larger community design that includes great buildings, of course.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone, I think it's an excellent question, to take a look at this new tool, LEED for Neighborhood Development. And it's our hope that it has as large of a transformation as the LEED rating system has had in the general building industry, because it is time to look beyond just the role of an individual building and to think about how groups of buildings and the spaces between them that we inhabit, what kind of places they are for people. So my hope is that this tool becomes a big catalyst for change, and since it's new, I don't know how it will actually impact the market, but that would be my hope.
One of the, and we're looking at LEED for neighborhood development for their two applications actually have been submitted from here in Portland. It's just going through the pilot stage, so who knows if the two Portland applications will be accepted, but I think they're probably two excellent ones. One is for the North Pearl, and one is for South Waterfront. I think one of the missing links still, even in the LEED ND, is this whole software side that I mentioned briefly. What we're discovering in South Waterfront is, we can go through and we can build all these great buildings, but if if you aren't at the same time building a community, you aren't going to be successful. And a community is made up not of buildings, but of people. So, so it's how are people going to interact with each other? How are they going to interact with the neighborhood that they're moving into? And so we got, committees on art and on the Greenway and getting retailers and what kind of retailers come in. And so this is all happening really at the grassroots level. And we've been actively supporting that. And I personally think that's probably, at the end of the day, that's more important than the bricks and mortar. And so that's where we really need to figure out how to make that part work. And we've got great lessons here in Portland. We've got great neighborhoods and great community infrastructure at that software level. And I think we can make an export business out of that.
Carla Kelly, City Club member. I guess my question takes it even down further into the neighborhoods. What will we be seeing in the near future regarding sustainability in single-family homes and in the kind of homes that people are raising their children in?
Well, again, touting all the local wonder stories. Earth Advantage is a program here in Portland. It was a spin-off from PGE. It's now a private nonprofit. They're doing some remarkable things working at the single-family level in terms of, and there are a number of builders in the Portland metropolitan area that are starting to incorporate these green principles into the single-family marketplace. And that, you were absolutely right, that's a huge marketplace. It's a heck of a lot bigger than the condos and the apartments that we're doing. And it's clearly a market that needs to be penetrated much more aggressively than we have to date.
Right, and Lead for Homes is, of course, coming out, and I think it's going to have a big impact. But we're also looking forward to seeing living buildings built at the residential scale. And I know that we have, there's at least 4 living building house projects that I'm aware of around the country that are hoping to provide a new model. And whether it's living building or not, there is a rise of net zero energy homes and homes that are really pushing the boundaries. And in many ways, the single family residence is an easier platform to do some of these things. And I really think that it's time for the single family residential industry to make a huge change, because frankly, we've been building those kinds of buildings the same way for so long, and there's a lot more that can be done to greatly reduce the amount of energy and resources that they use. And the fact that the home is the interface between the general population and the world of architecture, it's the most personal form of architecture, is where we live. What a better place, what a more needed place for these ideas to firmly take root. So.
Thank you. Gil Kelly, City Club member and Director of Planning for the City of Portland. Dennis, since you recently turned down my invitation to become a member of the city's Planning Commission, I'm here to take this opportunity to get a little bit of your free advice. He's turning red, folks, that's a good sign. Actually, for either of our guests, just let me state that I think there's a huge opportunity in the next couple of years in Portland as we revise our citywide comprehensive plan, probably the city's most important policy and community organizing document, something that hasn't been done in nearly 30 years to advance the sustainability agenda in a big way. I'm just wondering if what would be the top 2 or 3 things for each of you that we ought to put in that new set of policies for the city to really keep Portland in a leadership role in the green movement and the sustainability arena?
Think big. I think we have to, and I think, sometimes we're afraid to set big, what I call big, hairy, audacious goals. And I think we need big, hairy, audacious goals. I think we're absolutely headed into the time of probably the most impactful and significant change that any of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes. And that's even for those in the audience that were here for, for World War II. We're at a transformative time. And so I think, Portland clearly has an advantage over pretty much every other city in the United States because we had some genius in terms of some city fathers and some planners, and we had some happy accidents. We had the, whether it was genius or happy accident, we have incredibly small city blocks, 200 by 200. You go to any other city in the United States, they'd laugh at you. 200 by 200, how can you have a city with 40%, public right-of-way? But here it works, and it works because it creates a pedestrian scale that's very friendly, very accommodating, and it's really one of the significant secrets, I think, to our success. We also had a mayor in Neil Goldsmith who decided that we didn't need another damn freeway, and instead we got light rail. And now we've got the streetcar. And so we have the beginnings of a significant mass transit system in the city that is envied across the United States. But there's a long, long way we can go. So I think public transit has to be an incredibly important part of any future planning for the city. And we don't need to think about moving cars. We need to think about how do we move people, how do we move goods.
Next question.
Pam Sporborg, new City Club member. I was just wondering, there have been some preliminary studies done on how green buildings improve productivity among workers in terms of fewer worker absentee days and higher productivity on the job, and why that's not more a part of the conversation about green building, especially when worker outlays are usually the largest capital outlays among businesses, and how that could be more part of the conversation to include economic and social sustainability and not just the environment in terms of green building.
That's a wonderful question. And Jason, I'm sure, has got lots to say on this as well. Part of the problem is that most business people want facts, hard facts, and a lot of the stories of increased productivity, reduced absenteeism have been anecdotal, and so it's trying to get the hard data. One of the things we're doing, for instance, at OHSU, now the new building, the Center for Health and Healing, is over the next year and a half, we're going to study all of the employees, because they all used to work up on the Hill, and we're going to study the employees that are going into the new Peter Kohler Pavilion up on the Hill and the Center for Health and Healing down at South Waterfront, and see, do the environmental improvements that we've introduced into that building have an effect on productivity and absenteeism? So we could have some hard facts with two buildings that were built virtually at the same time, and while they have some different needs, there are a lot of similarities as well. And so I think it'll be a great opportunity to get some good data.
Yeah, I think Dennis is exactly right. That said, we actually do, talk about it quite a bit. And it's unfortunate that the paradigm is that for something to be true, there has to be a quantifiable fact, when we all know from experience some of the most important things in life are not measurable and not quantifiable. In fact, many of these things are in fact quantifiable and measurable, and as the studies emerge, it's becoming easier to have the discussion. But just because something isn't easy to measure doesn't mean that it's not real, and this is what we talk to people about. And related to that, there was a big study that I was involved in where we were trying to quantify the external cost to society of energy use in a building and due to the pollution generated from the energy use. And it was a really hard thing to do, but it's real. And when we use energy, and especially if we're in parts of the country where coal is the primary source of power, we commit the planet and to our cities to a certain amount of air pollution, which ends up in our lungs and causes health problems that we all bear as payers of taxes. And so we actually, in this study, took data from the Harvard School of Public Health that looked at the amount of money that taxpayers pay per pound of pollutant in different categories, and we were able to show that for every kilowatt hour of energy that's used, there's a negative gift to the taxpayer of certain hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's pretty interesting because it's not talked about, because it's really hard to get a good number. And we knew that our number wasn't very good, but it's better than zero, which is where the discussion was at. And when we know it's not zero. And so being willing to put yourself out there with ideas like this and begin to connect the dots is what we need. And so I appreciate the question, because when it comes to green buildings, they are better for people. And when it's better for people, and people are the most expensive part of any business, it's better for our bottom line. And man, it pays back quickly if you have a good workforce in your building. So.
I'm sorry to say that we're out of time. On behalf of the City Club of Portland, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I'd like to thank our radio and television audience for your interest in City Club, and ask you to join me in thanking our speakers. We are adjourned.